Hello and welcome back to the Observation Conversations channel, where today, as you can see, we're doing something a little bit different. Now, I am not joined today by my very good friend Reid, but I am joined by another very good friend, a very good and erstwhile of mine, and friend of this show, Jim. How you doing?
Doing well. Doing well. How about you?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited about today because today we're trying out a new show on this channel that we are calling The Extra Point, where we get to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to both of us, which is NFL football.
Is that name still up for debate? I don't think we had a committee meeting about that quite yet.
We can talk about it. We can negotiate it, but I
Well,
kind of like it, The Extra Point, because
it
it's
is
very
good.
much relating to I think one of the foundation stones of how we came to the idea of this show in the first place. Now, help me fill in the gaps here for the folks at home who I'm sure don't know about this. But you and I have known each other for a good number of years now, since when? 2016, 2017, around there, since high school.
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead. You want to say something?
Continue. You're on a
And
roll.
I think it's safe to say one of the topics that immediately unites our love of football, and love of talking about football, particularly us being fans of opposing teams in the same division, the NFC East. I think that's one of the earliest things that brought us together, wouldn't you say?
Brought us together, tears us apart every day.
Yes, every single year.
It's a delightful relationship.
It really is. It's a relationship built on paradoxes and contradictions, but we wouldn't have it any other way. And something that we've been doing for a number of years, I think since the 2019 season, has been what we love to do is each week before the main NFL slate on Sunday, we'll get together and we'll do a pick 'em, basically, where we'll pick the winners of each team of each game for that week. And we've been doing that for the past 5-6 years now, pretty regularly.
Since high school, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say that I believe I'm the all-time champion in that regard. I think if we went back and looked at the records, but that doesn't
Yes.
matter, of course.
Which I will say, our record keeping has always been a bit shaky. So
Yeah. I well, according to my record keeping, whenever I've been doing the record keeping, I win. And if I don't, then the record keeping starts to get a little shoddy at that point.
I see.
But
Okay.
if I do win,
see
I
how-
make sure to write that down.
I see how it is. Very well. All right. So, yes, we've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, where we'll get on and we'll make our picks. And one day along the road, the idea came to us that, hey, we have this YouTube channel, Reid and I, Observation Conversations. And you and I were talking about it, and we were saying, wouldn't it be so easy to just record these conversations that we're already having and put it on the channel? Because so often, as we're making these picks, we won't just pick the winners. We'll have all these fascinating little digressions into the state of the league and the state of each of these teams that we thought, there could be some nugget of entertainment there for the broader public.
You call them fascinating observations. They could also be described as absurdist cul-de-sacs, but the entertainment value is still there, certainly.
I would agree. Either way, I think if it's not informative, it's certainly entertaining in one way or another. I think that we've done it for long enough now where we can at least have some decent confidence in saying that.
Yes.
And so the idea was born.
And on that point, this podcast, by the way, we're not experts in the NFL. We are not NFL reporters or anything like that. No experience working in the NFL.
No.
Just armchair bullshitters. Sorry. Am I allowed to use language?
You are more than welcome to.
I didn't demonetize it, did I?
No, trust me, we were not monetized in the first place, so you are fine. Not about that.
But yes, don't expect any sort of expert analysis, insider information, nothing like that. We don't have it.
No.
We're just talking out of our behinds, but
Yes.
I think we know a decent amount.
I think so. I think so. As you just said, we are not insiders. We have no claim to any special information. All we are is just two fans, two Monday morning quarterbacks, so to speak, who love to get together and bullshit about the league that we love. And so that's what we're doing here. And so that was where the idea for this show was born. And actually, and maybe you can give the folks at home a little bit of an insider look into how this came about, but we actually tried to make this show once before. Do you remember this?
We had a pilot.
Yes.
Was it last year or 2 years ago?
2 years ago, I think.
2 years
Yeah.
ago, yes. We had a pilot. It went pretty well. I had fun. We made
Yeah.
our picks, everything like that. And it wasn't picked up for a full season, unfortunately.
Yeah, the network wouldn't pick it up, yeah.
The network said our programming slate for fall is already pretty full as is. So come back to us in 2 years, and so here we are.
There it is. Yeah, no, we did an unaired test episode, which, as you said, I think it went pretty well. But for whatever reason, we didn't end up carrying it through that year. But the idea never left us. We always kept that idea in the back of our heads. And here we are now, taking another run at it. Hopefully, this one will be a little bit longer lived. So, yeah, that is how the idea for this show came about. It's been a long journey to get here. And so now that we're on the road, let's hope we can stay on it. But I'm very excited to get started with this. And yeah, with that, any other notes? I know I've been doing a lot of the talking here. Anything else you wanted to say about how this show came about?
Well, it is your show.
Oh, it's our show. It's our show.
No, just that I'm excited to be here. I am excited for football to return. I've been counting down the days since February. Of course, I like baseball. I like watching baseball a lot. I like watching basketball a little bit, but nothing compares to a weekend full of NFL football to me.
Absolutely.
That is my true love right there.
Absolutely. And my feelings exactly. And here's a question for you, because you actually recently on this channel made your debut in a video that we made earlier in the summer, where we did Zillow Gone Wild 4th of July edition. Yeah, and you were great, by the way. The camera loves you, darling.
Oh, I know.
And so,
I know. That's what the producers keep telling me.
Well, exactly. And so I think we had a lot of fun with that Zillow Gone Wild. And so how does it feel to now be upgraded from guest on the show to co-host of a spin-off show?
Feels so powerful. I'm climbing the rings. I'm climbing the rings of the media circus already.
There you go.
Pretty soon I'm going to be calling some 1 p.m. games.
Absolutely. It has been
Jacksonville or something.
Yeah, in just 2 months, it has been a dizzying ascent, I think we can say with some confidence.
I've had some high highs. I've had some low lows. I'm ready for the movie star lifestyle. What can I say?
Yeah, what a summer it has been.
I'm ready to date Sabrina Carpenter and
it's
all that
time.
stuff.
I think
it's going to be
time.
hard for me to choose between her and Sydney Sweeney, but it's a choice I'll have to make soon.
Yeah, you have to take one for the team no matter what happens, I think. But yes, it has been quite a summer, hasn't it? And also, full disclosure for the folks at home, we are recording this part of the episode at a very special time because we are less than 40 minutes away from the beginning of the kickoff game, Ravens at Chiefs. How exciting is that? So we are literally knocking on the door of the return of NFL football finally, after what feels like forever. I mean, every offseason feels like forever.
Yes.
And, it's finally almost time for football to come back into our lives.
Real football, not backup preseason football.
Exactly. The real thing is almost back. So we're very excited for that. And with that energy, let's harness that energy.
And wrap this up so we can watch the game.
Exactly. Yeah, we got to get through this so we can get on the game.
And on that note, by the way, we are making our picks later, but we have committed to our picks for tonight's game, no matter what happens, because we might not even get there by the time it starts. So just want to put that out there. There is no shady business going on here. We are committed to our picks.
And we will discuss that very shortly. But first, there's quite a lot that we want to talk about in this first episode of the Extra Point, or whatever we want to call this show. And
I'll roll with it. I'll roll with it.
exactly, and that includes talking first a little bit more about both who we are and also who we are in a football sense. Now, I think the folks at home can probably guess who you support based on what you're wearing already. But do you want to just show the folks what you're wearing?
I mean, Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts. I don't know if that came across, but
it does.
I love Jalen Hurts in every sense of the word, on the field and off. I knew him briefly, but I've been an Eagles fan since birth. I mean, my family's from Philadelphia, and when you're born in Philadelphia and raised by Philadelphians, you don't get a choice.
It's like being born into a religion. Basically.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you don't get a choice. You are a football fan from birth, and more specifically, an Eagles fan. Maybe Penn State too, but definitely an Eagles fan.
Definitely.
So that's my mom's side. I come from that. I love the Eagles. My mom loves the Eagles. Everyone in my family loves the Eagles. And also, my dad is from California. So there's actually an interesting thing there. I have an AFC team and an NFC team.
Yes.
Considering my dad is a big Chargers fan, we go to all the games. I can now count myself as a Chargers fan too, just to make it interesting. You got to root for a losing team every once in a while, you know? It can't just all be the limelight and victory. So
got to be magnanimous. Got to be
exactly. And so I am also Chargers.
Ta-da.
Love the Chargers. And considering my name is James, my dad's name is James, how could I not be, you know?
There it is.
Hopefully Derwin will give me a reason to actually wear this jersey in public this year.
Absolutely. And so, yes, so your first love is the Philadelphia Eagles, but since you live in Southern California, the Chargers are very close at hand. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, isn't the Chargers practice facility just down the road from where you are in Orange County?
Up until this year, it has been. It's been right across the street from my college. So
there you go.
Yeah, I would park in the parking lot, look over. There's a Chargers practice facility right there. Unfortunately, they've gone Hollywood and moved to LA this year in a brand spanking new multi-million-dollar all-glass facility in El Segundo. But for the longest time, Justin Herbert was right across the street from me while I was in my trig classes and whatnot.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
How cool is that, though? I mean, fantastic. And so, yeah, no, I think it's so funny because when you tell that story, it's just so true. You know, your entire family are Eagles fans. You know, you've got that Philadelphia background. And so, yeah, it's like, it really is like being born into a religion. You know, you're born Jewish, you're born Catholic, you're born an Eagles fan, you know.
Yeah. Something about people in the Northeast and their football. You don't get that important. Same kind of vibe out here.
It's very important, absolutely. And so my own journey to NFL consciousness is similar, but not quite the same. Because unlike you, I didn't really have a lot of family history to draw on when it came to choosing who I supported. You know, I think I get the sense that you and I both started paying attention to the NFL around the same time, maybe, you know, early teens, you know, 12, 13, 14, around there. You know, I mean, I certainly, some of the first Super Bowls that I remember, like really remember, are the Legion of Boom Super Bowls. That was 2013, 2014.
Legendary era.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so that was one of the first times I was really paying attention to it. I grew up in northern New Jersey, kind of suburban northern New Jersey. And so, but none of my family really, at least not my immediate family, really had any deep ingrained NFL connections. You know, both of my parents and pretty much my entire family from my parents' generation and older are immigrants to this country. So nobody was really born here, grew up here to kind of soak in that kind of deep-seated loyalty. And so the only other NFL fan in our house really was my dad. And my dad, you know, God bless him, but he was a Cowboys fan, a longtime Cowboys fan. Now I'm talking like classic, old school Roger Staubach 70s and 80s Cowboys. That's the era that I'm talking about.
Your dad's Hank Hill?
well, kind of. I mean, kind of. You know, he immigrated to this country. Well, literally though, God's coach. I mean, he immigrated to this country in 1975, and that was what was in the zeitgeist. In the NFL
It's
world, in the
true.
football world. Tom Landry, God's coach, Roger Staubach. These are legendary
America.
figures.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, when he was new to this country, that's what he kind of latched onto, and he just became a Cowboys fan by default, and he stuck with it ever since. And so, if I was drawing solely on family connections, I probably would have picked the Cowboys. But as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in suburban northern New Jersey, so being a Cowboys fan would not have been the most popular choice. And so naturally, I started looking around. Well, if I'm
For
not going
your
to be
health
a
and
Cowboys
safety.
fan, well, exactly. And so I thought it wise to look for alternatives. And, that's a very kind of tender point when you can say, well, I can kind of choose any team to become loyal to and, just kind of go from there. And so I looked around and, I even considered being a fan of the Seahawks at one point. I was very interested in the Seahawks at that point because it was the Legion of Boom. But ultimately, what I came back around to was one of the teams in my very backyard. Of course, in New Jersey, you've got the Giants and you've got the Jets. And I thought, I really want to have my own hometown team that I could fly the colors of proudly. And so, which one am I going to pick? The Giants or the Jets?
And let's
And
consider that this is the early teens. Which one are you going to
exact,
pick?
exactly. And once I started looking into it and reading about it and learning about recent NFL history and overall NFL history, it became a very easy choice. God has always hated the Jets. God hates the Jets, and God has always hated the Jets. The Jets have had a very tortured existence, and it was certainly the case back then as well.
That's true. The only people who hate the Jets more than God are Jets fans.
Exactly. And honestly, that just seemed way too painful
Yeah.
to sign up to be a Jets fan.
You're
And
gonna
so,
you can't put that on your heart at the age of 13 and run with it for the rest of your life. You're not gonna make it very far.
exactly. And then I look at the Giants and I look at the proud history of the Giants, right? And then I look at the Super Bowls that they had just won in recent years, including one just a year or two ago in 2011, right? By the way, two Super Bowls that we won against the predominant, reigning Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, arguably at the peak of their powers, right?
Big deal. You're not the only ones to do it.
Twice we did that.
We did it with a backup.
Well, sure. You did it with a backup one time. We did it twice.
I feel like that should count for two. But moving on.
But yes, and so once I read about that and I learned about that history, I realized I've got my team, and I've been a Giants fan ever since. But as you said, there is something to having your main team, an NFC team, but then also having an AFC team that you pay attention to and you care about.
And you have the NFC East team back in the hometown, and then
Exactly.
you have the AFC team from wherever you moved to.
Yeah, back in the homeland, back in the mother country, and then yeah, exactly. You can adopt an AFC team that's much closer to where you live. Now, I've lived in a couple different places in my life. I grew up in Jersey. I also lived in California, where I met you, and now for the past several years, I've lived in Florida, particularly southern Florida.
Become
And
a Florida man.
And well, kind of. I will say I live in Florida. I'm not of Florida, but I live in Florida. So I'll just make that distinction.
Yeah,
Uh,
you haven't blown up any gas stations yet.
no, not yet. So naturally, the Dolphins have been of particular interest to me since I've been down here, and certainly in the past few years, how the Dolphins prospects have blossomed. It has been a joy to see, particularly as my main team, the Giants, have struggled so badly. It has been wonderful to have the Dolphins to fall back on and have a team to believe in that is close at hand.
Sure.
So that has been quite a joy. So
And some very cool uniforms and colors too.
Fantastic, yeah, and also another team with a great history. With a great history, I would say.
Yeah,
not
they once featured in a Jim Carrey Pet Detective movie.
Yeah, and everybody loves Ace Ventura. I mean, those are beloved films.
They put the Miami Dolphins on the map.
Definitely. And so yes, and so I think it's a great thing that we both have this kind of NFC AFC setup to lean on. And so that's a bit about who we are. Now, I think the next thing we wanted to talk about was a bit about what we're excited for in football coming back. What we're most excited for in football returning. Because as we mentioned earlier, every offseason feels like an eternity. You know, you've got the Super Bowl in February, and real football doesn't come back until the beginning of September after Labor Day. And so you've got what, 6 solid months there, 6+ solid months.
Are we counting the XFL? No, we shouldn't. It doesn't exist
anymore. Exactly. I don't think we can include it, honestly. But that's 6 solid months there of waiting for the league to come back. And yeah, you've got the preseason in August, but as you said, I mean, that's precious cold comfort when it's mostly starting backups.
There's a lot of value to be gleaned from the preseason, but a lot of interesting storylines come out of it. You know, there's information there to be had, but I'm not going to sit down and watch a preseason football game beginning to end.
It's impossible to bring yourself.
I'll look on Twitter afterwards to see what happened.
Yeah, it's impossible to bring yourself to get excited about a preseason football game. Mm-hmm. And so it's 6 long months to get back. And yeah, what's that journey been like for you this year? You know, coming through the end of the season, the Super Bowl, into the free agency, the draft, a long summer to now.
It's been, well, this is typically the time period where I take comfort in my much more distant second love of baseball. Unfortunately, I did grow up as an Angels fan for the most part, so that has not been too comforting. But I also like the Phillies and the Padres. Big Padres fan, and I've been able to at least enjoy Philadelphia seeing a lot of success in some sport. The Phillies have been going crazy, so that's been very fun to watch.
Even I know that.
The Angels are a lost cause, and I hate them. How they could let Shohei Ohtani walk is probably
and you hate the
biggest
Dodgers
gut
too.
punch. I hate the Dodgers. Hate the Dodgers. I would have been fine with him going to any other team. I would have been fine with the fucking Yankees.
Oh,
but
God.
The Dodgers, man.
Wow. To hear you say that now, that shook me to the core. To hear that you would even be okay with the Yankees over the Dodgers.
At least they're like a classic team that, like, you know, Shohei being on the Dodgers makes sense. I mean, he's the modern Babe Ruth. So like at least there's that kind of through line there. But the Dodgers got baseball is that's why I can't get too much into baseball these days. It's just so broken. The lack of a salary cap, the teams like the Dodgers and Yankees being able to buy every single good player and leave teams like the Pirates with just people you've never heard of. So, but more in the NFL sphere, which is what I think you were asking me about.
Yes.
It's been an interesting offseason. Of course, the Eagles have lost a lot of people. Jason Kelce is gone. He's retired. He's doing media tours and whatnot now, and I held out hope for a while there that he was going to pull a Tom Brady and say, "JK, I'm back," but I mean, their first game is tomorrow, and he still hasn't said it. So
yeah, too many tush pushes. Too many tush pushes.
The tush push might have made the Eagles relevant again, but it killed Jason Kelce in the process.
It would kill anybody. I mean, my God. I mean, not to get sidetracked from what you're saying, but I mean, so many tush pushes, and you have to imagine every time they run that play, that is 700, 1,000 pounds of men on top of you. I don't know. I'm saying 700, 1,000+ pounds of man on top of you every single time. It's unbelievable.
One would say it's unsustainable, but they're still doing it. They'll still be doing it. So we'll see how that works with Cam Jurgens doing it instead.
Yeah, God.
By the way, a guy who is spending his first year ever as a center. So Godspeed to him.
Yeah, seriously, my God. But anyway, yes. Back to what you were saying.
But you know, It's been a good off season, I think, especially for the Chargers. I mean, they have Jim Harbaugh now, and that was a very exciting news to hear. Been uh, after a year of begging for them to get rid of Brandon Staley, and they get the best head coaching candidate out there.
Yeah.
The draft was a little iffy for the Chargers because we'll get into this later, but I do have some concerns over who Justin Herbert will be throwing the ball to. They didn't really seem to address that too solidly, but we'll see. We'll see. It's been an interesting offseason. There's been a lot of changes for both of my teams, so excited to see it.
I will say, as far as the offseason, I mean, free agency was lively, but free agency is always lively. But the draft this year was very exciting. We had a record number of quarterbacks picked in the first round of the draft this year, which was very cool to see. I think something like the top 15 picks or something like that were all offensive players. So it was fascinating. The entire first half of the first round was all offensive players and quarterbacks, and almost all of the back half of the first round was defensive players. So that was fascinating to see. We got a bumper crop of rookie quarterbacks to look out for this year. That's going to be very, very interesting, including most of them going to be starters. So if not at the start of the season, certainly by the end of it. So that was fascinating to see.
We're getting a new era of the NFL here.
Yes, definitely. Changing of the guard, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another fun thing that happened this offseason, the roast of Tom Brady. I don't know if you watched that. That was a lot of fun.
Of course I watched it. I mean, in a couple ways, I was getting some more inside looks than everyone else. My sister was there. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow, yeah. Oh, you told me that, yeah.
Yeah, can I say this? I don't know. She works at the forum, so got a lot of inside information on that. That was pretty fascinating. It was a hilarious roast too. What's her name? The comedian who, I mean, really outshined everyone else there. I forget her name, but she was hilarious.
Yeah, no, I know who you're talking about. Let me see if I can look it up here. Because I do know who you're talking about. Well, first of all, we had a ton of great stand-ups and great performances during that roast.
Nikki Glazer,
yes. She brought the house down. She was fantastic.
Truly. Got under her skin a little bit, it seemed, at times.
I think several of them did, honestly.
Yeah.
You know who I thought from the NFL player side of things had a great set was Drew Bledsoe. I think he went up there. He did a fantastic job.
He's a natural.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah, I mean, we already knew Gronk was funny. He did a fantastic job. Julian Edelman, I think he did a really good job. So both from the professional comedians and from his formal NFL cohorts, I think it was just fantastic all around. Really, I think they did a really great job. So yeah, it's been a very lively offseason, I feel like, and yet despite that, the gap of time, those 6 months, just feel so long. Because, for the first month or two, you could mostly put it to the side of your mind. But by the time you're getting into May, June, you're missing football. July, you're really missing football. And then August, you've got the preseason. It's like, it's close to what I want, but it's still not what I want. It's so tantalizingly close. But
the preseason is the worst part yet because you're getting the constant reminders of football, but you still can't watch it. I feel like
exactly.
The preseason is the worst time because it's so close, but it's not there yet.
It's absolutely the most anxiety-inducing part of that whole cycle. And so, but we're finally here, September 5th. We made it, and we are now just minutes away.
No more going to YouTube and just watching NFL great plays compilation.
Exactly. Yeah. Going back to watching the highlights from last year. Exactly.
Going back to watch the highlights from the 2011 season or something like that. Because you've already watched all the other seasons.
Right. Exactly. And so we're finally here. We're just minutes away. This is like, this is like New Year's Eve. This is like New Year's Eve for football fans everywhere. Isn't that fun? And in 20 minutes, it's midnight. How great is that?
I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared we won't finish this in time. All right, and we are back. Had to take a quick little break, but the first topic I think we wanted to cover are storylines that we individually want to be taking a look at throughout the 2024 season. Some things that we might be interested in seeing how they play out.
Absolutely.
I've got a couple here. I think Jonathan, you've added some too. The first thing I wanted to look at is the NFL's new kickoff.
Yes.
We're getting a pretty fundamental rule change for the 2024 season. A lot of things are going to be different with this. NFL decided they wanted to change the kickoff rules because there were too many touchbacks. People just calling for a fair catch in the end zone and going to the 20. It was making the kickoff pretty predictable and unexciting.
Yes.
So they proposed some new rules, and if I have them here.
Yes, I also have what the NFL itself has said about this new. So they're calling it the new dynamic kickoff. I mean, that definitely it strikes me as very buzzwordy corporate speak, but that's what they're calling it, the dynamic kickoff.
Yeah,
and
we'll see how long they stick to calling it that.
Exactly. And what they're saying about it is to address the lowest kickoff return rate in NFL history during the 2023 season and an unacceptable injury rate on kickoffs prior to that, NFL clubs have approved a new kickoff rule for the 2024 season. The new form of free kick play is designed to resemble a typical scrimmage play by aligning players on both teams closer together, much closer together, I might add, and restricting movement to reduce space and speed. And the idea behind this is to promote more returns.
Yes. So the kicking team, everyone except the kicker, is going to be lining up on the 40-yard line, and the receiving team will be lining up on, I believe, the 35-yard line, so only 5 yards apart. A lot less space for them to build up speed before clashing into each other, which I can see how that would help with injuries. And yeah, there's a whole kickoff zone now from, let's see, what is this? The landing zone is between the team's goal line and the 20-yard line. So any kick in that zone, no more touchbacks, no more fair catches. You have to return it. And that should lead to what the NFL hopes is a lot more actual kickoff returns, which should make the kickoff a more integral part of the game again.
Yeah. And the key of what you just said is what the NFL hopes will produce more kickoff returns. It's yet to be seen if that will actually be the result. This is totally unprecedented.
Yeah, from what we've seen in the preseason, kickoff returns have gone up a lot.
Yes.
So it is working in that regard. It remains to be seen. I guess we'll see in a couple minutes here whether that'll translate to the regular season.
Yeah. And I want to play this video so we can show the folks at home exactly what we're talking about here. Because I think a visual aid would definitely be useful as we talk about what we like and don't like about this. So let me bring this video up and let me share this with everybody so we can all be on the same page here. All right, are you able to see that?
Yes.
Perfect. But you never know in these preseason games.
This one will be returned by Sims. And he's out to the 26, and that is it. We're going to replay it. Bigger rule change as we've seen in the game in a long, long time. You've got players that are lined up basically 5 yards from each other on the receiving team side of the 50. They're trying to make the kickoff an active, dynamic play again.
So there you go. So there's that term again, dynamic. They really want to push that.
So this is a rule change that, if I recall correctly, they're taking inspiration, let's say, from the XFL, in that this is the way that the XFL did the kickoff to make the game more interesting.
Yes.
So the NFL, I mean, we want to talk about our other great love of civilization, borrowing borrowing heavily from people who are also trying to do what they do. So, yeah, the NFL has taken some pointers from their feeder league of sorts. And yeah, I mean, this is a huge rule change for the NFL. This is going to make the game pretty different.
It is a huge change. And so let's just talk about kind of the top line of this. Do we like this change or not? And I'll say for myself, I recognize there is a degree of newness about this, just because it's a new thing and it's a change to the way that we've always been used to it being done. There is going to be some resistance to that. And so I do acknowledge that there is a chance that this will grow on me over time, especially if it is successful in producing more punt returns. I think that's great. If it can successfully create more punt returns. But given all that, I got to say, I don't love it. It looks, for me, when it comes to a rule change like this, I think that my big test, and test that most people have, is how does it look on TV, right? Because that's what the NFL is. At the end of the day, the NFL is a massive entertainment product. It's the world's biggest TV show, pretty much. That's why every network is climbing over each other to spend millions and millions on broadcast rights, because the NFL is a singular thing. If you want to talk about getting a huge swath of eyeballs all watching the same thing, the NFL is pretty much the last program that can do that. And so the NFL is the world's biggest TV show. That's why billionaires spend billions to get in on it. And so the ultimate test for a lot of these things is, well, how does it look on TV? How does it come off on TV? Because that's how most of us are experiencing the NFL's product, is watching it on television. And I have to say, compared to the old kickoff, I don't think it looks as good on TV. I think it looks too close. It looks too clustered. It looks too disorganized. I know that in theory it's more organized than what the old kickoff was, but it doesn't look that way to the layman watching this on television.
That's an interesting take. I'm gonna have to disagree with you here. I do think perhaps it could be fine-tuned and tweaked a little bit, but I think that this is better for TV, honestly. This makes the kickoff something that you might actually bother looking back up at the TV for, as opposed to an old kickoff. You're 90% of the time it's just going to land in the end zone. It's going to be a touchback. Guy's not going to move, and then they're going to go start on quarter way up the field. I think that this makes the kickoff actually more interesting to watch, something that you might actually bother staring at, which keeps eyes on the TV longer. The biggest downside I have with this kickoff itself is that while it seems like it creates more actual returns, I feel like the potential for a big return is lessened.
Yes.
Because the guys are already right there.
Exactly.
You don't have a lot of time to react. So there are going to be more returns, but they might be less exciting.
Exactly.
Because like with the old kickoff, there's a lot less returns, but for those returns, there's a lot more potential to get really far upfield if you are returning it. Exactly. Here, there's not a lot of time to, okay, I got the ball. Oh shit, they're already right here.
Yeah, and also I just have to say, because look, we're football fans, so we're well acquainted with NFL safety rules. We're well acquainted with how safety in the NFL has evolved over the past 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. We know all of that stuff. But looking at this, right, looking at the new kickoff, we're football fans. We get all that. But if you're, your mom's coworker's sister, right, someone who's not an NFL fan, someone who doesn't know a lot about the sport, doesn't watch the NFL religiously, if you watch this, right, there is a lot of sensitivity to the so-called normies out there thinking about the NFL being hyper-violent. And I think this looks more violent than the old kickoff looks. I think that, again, to use that, your mom's coworker's sister as an example, right? I think they look at this and they think that this looks a lot more violent than what the old kickoff looks like.
Well, then you can just go tell them that, actually, it's less violent and it will lead to less injuries than the previous kickoff. And then they're going to think, holy fuck, what was the previous kickoff like then?
Well, maybe so. I mean, that's a very fair point. That is a very fair point.
But, I mean, I do like this change in general. I like that it's going to make the kickoffs more interesting. At least something is happening, you
Right,
know,
sure.
because I mean, after a team scores a touchdown, there's a good like 5 minutes where nothing's happening, man. So
Okay, well, yeah, that's
I
very
like
fair.
that part. The biggest thing I don't like about the rule change is not actually with the kickoff itself, it's how they're changing the onside rule thing, the onside kick rule. Whereas now, if a team is going to do an onside kick, they have to let the referee know beforehand, and the referee is going to go let the receiving team know beforehand. So that completely eliminates any sort of surprise onside kick, which, let's be honest, at this point in the NFL is the only way to successfully conduct an onside kick is if you do it by surprise, because I feel like they need to do something different. If they're going to change the kickoff, they're going to need to find a way to change the onside kick, especially if the other team's going to know about it beforehand. They need to find a way to change the rules with the onside kick to make them actually possible for the kicking team to actually get the ball back, because if the other team knows beforehand, that's got to be like a 95% chance or higher that they're not getting that ball back, and now the ball's at the 50-yard line.
Very fair, very fair. And so, you've definitely got a more positive perspective on the new kickoff than I do, and I hope you're right, by the way. I hope the new kickoff is successful. I hope it does what it's designed to do, and I hope you're right, and I hope it does grow on me. Right now, I'm still feeling skeptical of it, but as you said, I mean, we're about to see the new kickoff in action in a NFL game during the kickoff game, I should say, the kickoff during the kickoff game. And so I think that will be a huge test for the whole country to see how that looks and how they feel about it. I hope you're right. I hope it does grow on me. I'm still feeling skeptical now, but we'll check in again in a couple of weeks, and maybe I'm feeling a lot better about it. So we will certainly see. Anything else you wanted to add on that, or should we move on to our next point?
Yeah, I just a little excited to see how it plays out in the first couple of weeks, and maybe in a future episode, we'll watch a couple weeks of NFL football, see how it looks, and then we can come back and readdress what we think about it then.
We definitely will. We definitely will. And so I see the next point we wanted to touch on here was you wanted to talk about some of the QB situations, some of the more interesting QB situations around the league. And I think this is very fertile ground for discussion.
Yeah. So, I mean, for a lot of teams in the NFL right now, we've had a big shakeup in the QB room. We have, obviously the Bears they gave up on Justin Fields, got rid of him, brought in Caleb Williams, the best quarterback in the draft, allegedly. So they've moved on. They've got a new situation there. They've got a lot of hope there.
Yes, they do.
They know what they're doing in Chicago. Their path forward with their quarterback is laid out. What I want to take a closer look at is the teams where their quarterback situations are kind of up in the air coming into this season. Unclear. We have New England, and if you want to take a look at New England's quarterback situation, they will be starting Jacoby Brissett week 1.
Yes.
Now, they drafted Drake May in the draft this season. He's by all accounts, seems to be a very good quarterback. He was doing very well in the preseason. And we should preface this by saying they've been dealing with Mac Jones for the past couple seasons, and that has not been going well. So change was needed. Change was absolutely needed. So they go and they draft Drake May out of North Carolina to be their quarterback of the future. But they also signed Jacoby Brissett to be sort of like a veteran mentor in the quarterback room to, kind of play out the first couple of games of the season, shepherd Drake May on the right path. And it seems like a good idea. You don't want to drop. You get a big quarterback like that who's maybe not the top of the line in the rookie receiving core and the rookie quarterback room. You don't want to drop him right in, based on the
Especially
situation.
after the Mac Jones experience.
Exactly. You want to build up his confidence, make sure he's surrounded by people that will help him be successful. So kind of want to ease him into it. But a sort of conundrum emerged for the Patriots, from what I understand, during training camp in the preseason, which was, oh wait, Drake May's already really good already. He's been, according to the coaching staff and reporters in New England, he's already outperforming Jacoby Brissett in the preseason, in training camp. He's doing much better than him. So they kind of had this, situation where the mentor QB who's starting already looks to be not as good as the guy who he's mentoring. So now they have this situation where they've declared Jacoby Brissett will be the starting quarterback for to begin the season.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, it doesn't look like he'll be playing out the full season. Because if Drake May's really that good, do you want him just sitting on the bench, not getting any experience or any playing time?
Well, it is a very interesting kind of conundrum from both angles. And so, first, I just wanted to say about Mac Jones, I don't think what happened with Mac Jones was entirely Mac Jones's fault. I think that he came in to a very tough situation because he was drafted as a true heir apparent to Tom Brady, right? Because nobody ever thought during the 2020 season that Cam Newton was going to be the Patriots' long-term answer. I mean, nobody thought that. Mac Jones was drafted in the middle of the first round, right? Bill Belichick really liked him because he was an Alabama quarterback. There's the Nick Saban connection. Belichick and Saban have always been very close. And Belichick takes Saban's recommendations very seriously. And so when Mac Jones did what he was able to do at Alabama, he came with a ringing endorsement from Saban, and Belichick took him in the first round, even though he has been loath to draft quarterbacks that highly. And I think that was a very tough position to come into expectations-wise. And then when you look at the coaching and the coordinators that he had over his tenure in New England, it was extremely chaotic. This is a guy who did not have a lot of support during his time in New England. And so did he struggle? Absolutely. But I don't think that was a true reflection of his talent. I think he was just coming into a very expectation-laden and chaotic situation that created some issues. I don't think that everything that happened with Mac Jones was his fault necessarily. And now you've got Drake May coming in, drafted 3rd overall. And in a lot of ways, I look at Drake May, and I think Drake May is the version of Daniel Jones that actually deserves to be drafted in the high first round. Drake May, he's a tall white kid that is very accurate, and he can move around. He can run, right? And he comes from a North Carolina university that is strong in football, but isn't a perennial powerhouse.
It's not a football school.
No, not at all. And so
the fact that North Carolina was able to do so well is very much a testament to Drake May himself, because North Carolina doesn't care about football.
I mean, they do.
As compared to basketball. It's the second focus.
Exactly. And so again, Drake May is the version of Daniel Jones that actually deserves to be drafted that highly. White guy, tall, accurate, moves around, comes from mainly a basketball school. But Drake May actually is that good, unlike Daniel Jones. And so there's a lot of hope for him. And so I think that there are a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of Patriots fans, who are very excited to see him right away. But at the same time,
I just saw the broadcast.
Yes.
The broadcast is on in the background. I just saw a B-2 stealth bomber fly over, and I did the soy jack face.
Literally, because we're both aviation nerds, so we love that stuff.
Yes. Oh God, to see one in person one day. It's so unfortunate that SoFi, the stadium I mainly go to, has a roof. I don't think I'll ever get to see it.
Well, there you go.
Well, moving on, Drake May.
Yes. And so those were the upsides to Drake May, but at the same time, Jacoby Brissett, I think, is also a really interesting story, because if you remember back in 2022, right? Deshaun Watson, Cleveland, he had gotten basically drummed out of Houston. They wanted to let him go, right? under a very heavy cloud of controversy. And despite all of that, the Cleveland Browns, who are famously kind of desperate for stability at quarterback, even though everyone else was telling them don't do it, they paid top dollar to bring in Deshaun Watson from Houston and give him a shiny new contract. And so they said, even though you're under a very heavy cloud of controversy, we're going to pay you top dollar, come to Cleveland, be our starting quarterback. No other team would do that. The Browns did that. But he still couldn't play for most of that season because of suspensions. And so for the first 9 weeks or so of that season, the 2022 season, it wasn't Deshaun who was starting. It was actually Jacoby Brissett who was starting. And as you'll recall, the Browns, they didn't win a lot of games during the 2022 season, but Jacoby Brissett was surprisingly very effective in those games. And if you go back and you look at that record, a lot of those games were very close when they were never expected to be close at all. And so Jacoby Brissett coming in as a fill-in for Deshaun, right, in a very kind of swirling, uncertain situation, comported himself very well. Comported himself very, very well. Just like how we love Josh Dobbs, the Pastronaut from last year, Jacoby Brissett was that 2 years ago. And so this is someone who's comported himself very well. He is a very capable veteran. Not a long-term answer, obviously, but someone who can do a very good job as a fill-in for half a season, maybe more than that. And so I think that if you do want to give Drake May a little bit more time to develop, I know we all want to see him right now, but I think if you do want to sit him for a bit, give him some more time to cook, Jacoby Brissett is probably one of the best people you can turn to do that, who doesn't also cost a fortune.
And by the way, I just want to point out, we just had our first ever regular season dynamic kickoff, and it was an end zone touchback. So we're going to have to keep watching.
Yeah, there you go. Gosh.
But
so yeah, it's
yes,
very interesting.
For the situation he is in, Jacoby Brissett is very capable to take on the responsibilities he's been given.
Yes.
Just get the team going, get the team started for the first couple games of the season at least. Give New England's, newer offensive line and receiving core a chance to develop with someone with experience in the NFL. Just give the team a chance to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, it's a new regime for the first time in more than 2 decades in New England. Now Gerard Mayo is the head coach. Belichick stepped aside. He had a succession plan in place. Gerard Mayo is the guy. And so it's a new era for them, truly. Brady's been gone for a while, but now both of them are definitively out of the picture. So this really is a new day for New England, and
perhaps
we'll have to see what they
emerging
make
from
of it.
the painful post-Brady transition.
Yes, and it has been very painful for them.
Coming into their own, coming into a new era that is not a transition.
Yes, most definitely. And so moving on to, I see the next team that you have listed here is Pittsburgh. You want to talk about Pittsburgh for a minute?
Yeah. Let's take a look at what Pittsburgh did in this offseason. They not only signed Russell Wilson, who for many years was one of the preeminent quarterbacks in the NFL, no question, but has been going through a pretty rough time as of late. The Sean Payton, Russell Wilson experiment in Denver did not go well.
No.
I think everyone can agree on that. To the point where, whether it was based on actual performance or just a very overt signal that they're going to move on without him, they benched him.
Yeah.
In the latter half of the season.
I will say, not as bad as the Nat Hackett Russ experience. That was even worse.
Yeah. So obviously it wasn't working out in Denver, whether that was a testament to Russ's current ability or just the situation in Denver. I guess we'll find out here. But yeah, they lost confidence in him, let him go. Pittsburgh signed him, but they did something else too.
Yes.
They traded for Justin Fields, who I think many in the league would argue, while he hasn't shown that he's one of the better quarterbacks in the league, he's certainly still at this point being thought of as a player who could start for an NFL team. I would say, in a lot of situations, on a lot of teams in the NFL, he would be starting for them. So Pittsburgh has found themselves in a situation where they have two maybe borderline starter level quarterbacks, and they had to make a decision for who would be starting, the older veteran or I don't know, what would you call him?
Justin Fields?
A younger veteran?
I guess so. Yeah, sure.
Who still has
someone who is promising but has not yet realized his full potential.
Yeah, he's been in the league for a couple of years, but he still has more to show.
Yes.
It's pretty agreed upon that there's still potential there. He's been in the league a couple of years. It hasn't gone great, but there is still potential for him.
Yes.
So Pittsburgh is going to be starting Russ. There is this whole quarterback controversy that may or may not have been. There was a battle that may or may not have existed. It's not entirely certain whether there even was a battle there to begin with, or if they were just committed to Russell Wilson starting anyways. But what we do know now is that Russell Wilson will be starting week 1. And the question is, what's going to happen with Justin Fields?
Yeah.
If Russell doesn't perform super well the first couple of weeks, will they go to him? Are they going to give him the full season to figure it out? We don't know. That's what really interests me about Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I want to address Russell Wilson point for a moment, which is
you've always loved Russell Wilson.
I gotta say, it really has been very sad to me to watch what's happened with Russell Wilson these past couple of seasons, because Russell Wilson is someone who was an early hero of mine in the NFL. You know, we have to remember that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I think Russ came into the league in like 2010, 2011. Obviously, you had those Super Bowl runs in 2012, 2013. And, you know, Russ, you have to remember that back then, almost 15 years ago, you didn't have anywhere near as many black starting quarterbacks in the NFL as you do now. It was a much rarer thing then. And Russ was someone who was a black quarterback that I could really look up to, and he was electrifying. He is someone that was really exciting. He was a very rare example of that time. Again, there's more examples now, but at that time of an NFL starting quarterback who also had that baseball pedigree and that baseball skill set in addition to that NFL skill set in terms of running and sliding. Exactly. Well, really, legitimately though, he wasn't the biggest guy, but he was accurate. He could push the ball downfield and he could run. That was a huge part of his game. And we have to remember that back then, we used to say Chef Russ and let Russ cook, unironically. We used to say that earnestly because it was true. I
almost forgot that there was a point in time where that wasn't a meme.
I mean, legitimately, we used to legitimately say that because it was true. Nowadays, we associate Patrick Mahomes as the gold standard for making out of nothing. Well, before there was Mahomes making something out of nothing, it was Russell Wilson coming from behind and making something out of nothing. And so it was so exciting for me to follow him through those boom days and really look up to him as a black quarterback who was having a lot of success and really changing and transforming what a quarterback could be in this league. And so I always liked him for that reason. I always looked up to him for that reason. But then obviously his Seahawks tenure came to an end. And what happened in Denver obviously was very sad. I mean, that is to date the low point of his career. Nathaniel Hackett was a total disaster. And then Sean Payton came in. Basically, the idea behind Sean Payton was, if anyone can fix Russ, it's Sean. I mean, this is a guy who kept Drew Brees standing for almost 20 years and made him an all-time great, right? And so, if anyone could come in and fix Russ, it's Sean Payton. And even Sean Payton couldn't do it. And so now he is basically given away to Pittsburgh for a pittance, just to turn the page to a new era in Denver. And honestly, I have no hope that Pittsburgh is going to be the place where it turns around and we get back to the old Russ, because Russ isn't getting any younger. That's pretty obvious. He's not getting any younger. And what really baffles me about Pittsburgh is Arthur Smith. When we make our picks and we talk about different individuals and different teams, we'll often phrase it in terms of the individuals and teams we do respect and the individuals and teams we don't respect. And Arthur Smith is very solidly in the camp of people we don't respect. It has been so sad to watch. It had been so sad to watch his mismanagement of the Atlanta Falcons over the course of 3 seasons.
You don't know. You don't need to tell me, man. I had Bijan Robinson on my fantasy team. You don't need to tell me. I know. I
know you did. I mean, it was just a crushing pit of mediocrity and mismanagement over the course of his tenure in Atlanta.
Arthur Smith lost me my fantasy league.
And
I need to get that on the t-shirt.
And just baffling decisions. So many baffling decisions that he made. Mm-hmm. And so nobody was sorry to see him go, least of all Falcons fans. Literally, when the regular season ended, Week 18, at midnight 01 a.m., the Falcons fired Arthur Smith. They didn't even wait until the next morning. Most teams will wait until the next morning. Literally 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the notification went out, Arthur Smith has been fired. They had that shit queued up and ready to go. They were so excited to get that out. And we were all so excited to see that. And so he gets run out of Atlanta. I think the Falcons find a fantastic replacement.
By the way, Arthur Smith, self-made man?
Hardly anything but. A scion of course, the Smith family of FedEx fame, multi-millionaires. So this is a guy who is very much independently wealthy. And so, again, nobody's shedding any tears for this guy when he loses his job, because we know he's set no matter what. But anyway, he gets run out of Atlanta. The Falcons find an excellent replacement in Raheem Morris, who, if you ask me, should have had the job all along in the first place, because he was the interim coach after they fired Dan Quinn, did a pretty good job as interim coach. Raheem Morris had been with the Rams, brought himself and several other Rams coaches over to essentially establish a Rams East in Atlanta. And now, I think they're going to have a lot of success with that. And now Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. And so it's just so funny to me that Pittsburgh is playing Atlanta week 1. So Arthur Smith is going back to Atlanta the very first week. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But if you ask me, these are just two people who are on the absolute wrong trajectory. Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith. If you ask me, they're the two masters of disaster of the past few years. And it's very hard for me to see how two wrongs make a right, I just don't see that. I mean, does that make sense to you, two wrongs making a right?
No. I don't think it's the most optimal situation for either of them here. Not that I care about what happens to Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
He can. Well, I won't say what he can do, but there is hope in the fact that maybe it didn't work with Sean Payton, but now he has Mike Tomlin as a head coach. This is a guy who doesn't lose seasons. He just doesn't do it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it, at the very least, can't be as bad as it was in Pittsburgh. But yeah, I actually see. I think the situation in Pittsburgh might be pretty good for him. I think them going out and signing Wilson and Fields is a good indicator that I think Pittsburgh is in the mood to win this season, to get into the playoffs this season, to make a run. Because you're really setting yourself in a way where you have a contingency plan at quarterback. You have two quarterbacks with, I would argue, if this was Madden, a pretty similar overall. So I think them going out and getting Wilson and Fields is actually a good look for Wilson, because I think that means the team wants to win right now. Yeah. So if he can perform, I think the onus is on him to do a good job. He's got Mike Tomlin. Yes, he has Arthur Smith, but at least it's not Matt Canada. At least they're going to be trying offense.
I mean, you want to talk about masters of disaster. Going from Matt Canada to Arthur Smith, I don't see how that's an improvement at all, honestly.
At least Arthur Smith, I would think, would be trying to score points on offense. Matt Canada seemed like he was actively stonewalling the Pittsburgh Steelers from scoring points. I mean, I was just I don't know if you saw this. I was just watching this video the other day of the Pittsburgh quarterback calling an audible to do a game-winning touchdown pass, and they had the camera on Matt Canada seeing the quarterback call an audible from what he called and then win the game, and he looked pissed. He looked pissed that the Steelers won. I think that guy might have a grudge against Tomlin or the city of Pittsburgh or something, because he was actively trying to make that team lose, and now you have a guy who might not be a very good coach, but I don't think he has sick ulterior motives.
Well, that's true. Yeah, Matt Canada's offenses were very scoring challenged, which is not ideal on offense, certainly.
See, you want to be scoring if you're an offensive coordinator. You want to be putting your team in a position to score. So I think the situation can't get any worse than it was last year for Pittsburgh. And I think with Russell Wilson being on a team with a coach who doesn't lose seasons, that should do something for him. It should look better for him than it did in Denver, certainly.
Okay, well.
But the onus is on him. And the big question for me is, like I said, if Russ doesn't perform to expectations, will they bench him?
Yeah.
Because Denver did.
Yeah. I think that's certainly what you just described is the most hopeful version of events. So we'll see. You know, if this is a best case timeline.
And I hate Pittsburgh, but still.
I know you. I know. If this is a best case timeline for Pittsburgh, then that's what'll happen. I'm a lot more pessimistic. I just don't think the ingredients are right to make this to make this work. You know, it's like, you know, Pittsburgh. What they need to do is they need to make a nice traditional lasagna, right? But the only ingredients they have are tortillas and ketchup. You know, It's like the ingredients aren't correct for the thing that you need to make. You know. So
it's interesting you say that, because I think the formula in Pittsburgh, if you ignore offensive coordinator, which obviously was their biggest problem last year, and they didn't really do anything, I think, to improve it. But outside of offensive coordinator, I think the pieces are there, quite honestly. I think they have a pretty good shot.
Okay.
I mean, I think their quarterback situation is, well, it's pretty fluid, but I think it has a lot of potential with both players. I've always been a big Justin Fields believer that he can get it together somewhere. And they've got some good weapons on the offense. They've got, I mean, two running backs that I think are starter caliber. I think Pickens is going to have a very good year. Yeah, I think their weapons on offense can offset the existence and presence of Arthur Smith in some way to at least get him to a wild card.
Very well. Very well. Yeah, that's fair. I will say, just to spare a quick word on Justin Fields, then we'll move on, is like you, listen, you know, like I said before, Russ isn't getting any younger. You know, there's no such thing as turning back the clock. I don't think that there's going to be a massive reversal there, especially once the decline has begun. I mean, it's very, very rare the decline begins and then a quarterback can come back from that. But Justin Fields is still very young. does still have a lot of room to grow, and is someone that has flashed real potential in Chicago, real potential.
And that's what I'm thinking is the Pittsburgh situation for quarterback. If Russ doesn't, I think the Steelers have a good chance, because if Russ doesn't perform to expectation, they have Justin Fields, and that is a kid who has a lot to prove.
Yeah.
So if one quarterback situation doesn't work out, the other one's going to get him to the playoffs, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, with that, should we spare a quick word for Atlanta? I see you also have Atlanta here.
Yes, not as much to say. Oh, and by the way, I believe you have Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers on your team.
I do. That's true. Yes. On my fantasy football team. Yes.
Derrick Henry just got a touchdown, and Zay Flowers. I just watched Zay Flowers get a 20-yard reception. So.
Oh, fantastic! That is music to my ears.
The projection has flipped. I was originally projected to beat you, and now you're projected to beat me.
Oh, that is wonderful news.
We might as well call it now.
Happy day. That's great news. Well, thank you for that update.
Yes, but moving on to Atlanta. Not as much of a controversy or battle, I don't think. I mean, it was pretty obvious. They signed Kirk Cousins from Minnesota, and even though they drafted Michael Penix in the draft, I think it was still, I mean, obviously Kirk Cousins was going to be starting. They don't pay him all that money for him to be a backup to a rookie.
Of course. Kirk
Cousins, he's not the flashiest quarterback ever, but he is absolutely starting caliber. Yeah. I don't think anyone can argue. So this seems like a situation where, kind of like in New England, they have the veteran starting the season and being a mentor to the younger guy. But in this situation, Kirk Cousins, obviously, I'm sure I see him, unless barring some sort of injury, he's going to be starting every game this season. They're not going to be bringing Penix in, even if Kirk struggles, because they have him for several years, if I'm not mistaken. So I guess what's just interesting to me about this is, I mean, there was that controversy with them drafting him, but I think it works out pretty well. I think it makes a lot of sense. Michael Penix wasn't the best quarterback coming out of the draft. He didn't have what people saw as the highest potential. So a year or even 2 full years of him backing up Kirk Cousins, I think, would work out very well for both of them.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to put it. Kirk Cousins is not the flashiest. You know, he's not the Bugatti. You know, he's not the high end luxury car, the high end sports car. But what he is a sturdy Toyota Corolla.
Yes.
Not the flashiest, but damn it, it'll get you there.
It'll get you there. Yeah. It'll get you there, and it'll have good mileage.
Exactly. It'll get you there, and you can drive that thing till the wheels fall off, you know? And I think that's a great metaphor for Kirk.
Yeah.
And so,
utilitarian quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
you know,
put him in any situation, and he's not going to be MVP, but he will do what you need him to do.
Exactly. And as you said, the Falcons did not bring him in and pay him all that money, give him another huge contract just to have him back up a rookie.
Break the NFL rules to bring him in.
Exactly. They're not going to do that. But I am also a supporter of what the Falcons did with drafting Penix, in addition to bringing in Kirk, because with Kirk, you have someone that can win games for you right now. You know, someone who is not the flashiest, but is capable of occasional heroics and can win games for you on the strength of his own talents, and has a solid track record of doing that.
Mm-hmm. And
so he's someone that you can win right now with. But at the same time, he's getting into his mid-30s, and he's coming off of an ACL, a season-ending ACL. It makes a lot of sense for the Falcons to not put all of their eggs in that one basket. They want to have an option to keep their season going should the worst happen to Kirk. And again, there's recent history to suggest that could happen. And so I think it's great. You know, with Michael Penix, the GM of the Falcons fell in love with Penix, knew that as someone that they wanted to have in their QB room. And Penix is someone who, if Kirk does get hurt, they can play Penix and keep the fan base excited, keep the momentum alive, and keep their season going if they're on the road to a playoff spot, which in that division they may very well be. If they didn't do that, if they let Penix fall into someone else's hands, as he would have done, as we know, the only reason the Raiders didn't draft a quarterback this time around is because the top 5 were all gone by the time the top 6 were all gone by the time the Raiders were picking. If the Falcons, who loved Penix, didn't get him there, it was a guarantee he never would have survived the first round. So if they loved him, they went ahead and got him. And if something does happen to Kirk, Penix is someone who can keep a playoff run alive. So I think it was a very wise investment for the Falcons, because you look at what happened with Kirk's old team, the Vikings, right? They drafted J.J. McCarthy, a lot of expectations. He's going to be our day one starter. Gets injured, season-ending meniscus tear in the preseason, done for the whole season. And now what do? Sam Darnold for the whole year? Maybe, but nobody believes that is a credible playoff team. Nobody believes that.
I don't even think they would.
No, of course not.
Least of all them.
And so just because of that one bit of bad luck, their entire season is blown up. If that happened to the Falcons, they would still be alive today because they have a backup plan, a highly credible backup plan. And so they caught a lot of flack for this on draft day. But I believe then, and I continue to believe, that was a very wise investment on their part.
Because they don't need more weapons on offense or anything like that. So if they have the cap space to spare for making a backup plan like that, do it. Go for it. Yeah.
Absolutely. The Falcons know that their path is clear to winning this division. They have a highly credible path to winning this division and making an appearance in the playoffs. They're not going to risk blowing all of that if Kirk gets injured again, which is fairly likely. So a very wise investment, I think. Now, do we want to talk a little bit about Justin Herbert and the Chargers? I know you wanted to talk a bit about who the hell is Justin Herbert going to throw to this year?
I think I'll cover that more so in my division predictions.
Okay.
I think let's use the storyline section. I know I put that there, but let's use the storyline section for more NFL overarching things. I'm going to override myself here, and yeah, I'll go into detail there because I've got a lot to say there. I'll go into detail on that when we're talking about the AFC West.
Yes, well, that is very fair.
Yes, let's talk about your topic.
Well, actually, before we jump into that, I was going to say, because I know that we have so much to say about some of these other topics that we have listed here. Do we want to pack this in and bring it back for part 2 when we're at liberty to record that?
Very well. Yeah, we'll address these topics in the second half of this episode.
Yes.
So we'll have talking about coaches on the hot seat. Maybe we'll get a little bit into the potential of a Chiefs 3-peat.
Yes.
And talk about maybe some of our rookies that we're looking at. I know one of the rookies you said, Xavier Worthy. You were talking about him earlier before we got on the pod. And guess what? Guy has already got his first touchdown in the NFL.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah.
So whoever has Xavier Worthy in the fantasy league is going to be happy about that.
I don't think he's starting for anybody. I think he's on somebody's bench. Let's see. Oh, no, he's on my friend Fiona's flex spot. So.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. So, yeah, so all of that and more coming up in part 2, including our coveted predictions of division winners. That's going to be, I think, very contentious.
Yep.
Got some very close divisions this year. And then, as promised, as I said, the entire genesis of this show was us making our weekly picks for every game of that week. We are going to make our full Week 1 predictions in part 2. So, this was just
Stay tuned for that. We have an interesting little way of scoring it too, don't we?
Yes, we do. So this was just a taste of what's to come. So we will see all of you again in part 2 of this video. But for right now, we've got a kickoff game to watch. So
Yes, we've already missed a good quarter of it. So
yeah, so we got to get in and see what the hell's going to happen with this. Kickoff game is
Taylor
always
Swift
so
camp.
exciting. And Taylor Swift, we've got to talk about Taylor Swift.
We're missing
too.
Taylor Swift
I
right
know. we're missing the 4 seconds per game of Taylor Swift footage. So
I think they've already surpassed 4 seconds.
okay, well there you go. So
I guess I can watch it at the end of the year when somebody posts the Taylor Swift during the broadcast compilation.
Of course, yeah.
For now, I want to see it live. I want to see as much as I can of it live.
Absolutely, yeah. All of these grown men bitching about 10 seconds of Taylor Swift being shown in a 3-hour telecast.
Honestly.
Yeah.
The Taylor Swift broadcast bothers you, but the 200 Viagra commercials during the game don't. I'd rather look at Taylor Swift than a couple holding hands in separate bathtubs on the beach.
Hey, cheers to that. And so, so all of that to come in part 2, but for now, we've got to watch this kickoff game. So thank you all so much for watching, and depending on how I edit this, maybe this will be its own video, or maybe part 2 will start right now. But otherwise, until then,
we've just got too much content.
Exactly. All right, see you, everybody.
Later.